And when Jesus was praying the fourth prayer, he changed the meaning. When he would have spoken in the second part about thanking God for redemption, he would have spoken about the blood of the new covenants. Now all that, of course, we need to go to Sinai. So we'll be looking at that a little bit later. But right now, we're trying to have a sense that the Passover that we're looking at in chapter 12 and 13, 11 and 12 rather, really came to Jesus as the greatest of feasts, remembering the Exodus, and he transformed that to remember what he was about to do, his own suffering and death on a cross. So, that's where Jesus fits in, but we could also go even a little bit further into the 2nd and 3rd centuries and see how the Feast of Passover still dominated us as Christians. There was a massive argument, in a friendly way as Christians do, as you know, between those that wanted to celebrate Easter on the same day as the Jewish people did, on the 14th of Nisan. 14th of Nisan is the night of the full moon of the spring equinox. And they were called the Quartodecimans, and those who wanted to transfer it to the nearest Sunday, or Saturday night, the vigil. And those that wanted to keep the same date as the Jewish people actually followed St. John's Gospel, and St. John's Gospel very clearly ties the Passover to Jesus' death. In St. John's Gospel, Jesus dies on the eve of Passover while the priests in the temple are killing the lambs for the Passover meal that night. And the irony is in St. John, while the priests are killing thousands of lambs, the real Lamb of God is dying on a cross. So it's very powerful, very beautiful, St. John. And all his followers in Asia Minor wanted to keep that feast day. One of the great saints of Asia Minor is Melito of Sardis. And during the Easter Vigil, he proclaimed a most astonishing homily, beautiful homily, and we're very privileged to have that from around the year 200. And the homily of Melito of Sardis for the Easter liturgy, the Easter Vigil, is all about the Paschal Lamb. Now I'll just read you a tiny little bit of it. We're so privileged to have it. Here we go. Like a lamb he was led away. Like a lamb he was sacrificed. He who delivered us from the slavery of the world as from another Egypt, and who liberated us from slavery to the devil as from the hand of Pharaoh, and who impressed upon our souls the seal of his own blood. It was he who covered death with shame, and who threw the devil into mourning, as Moses did Pharaoh. It is he who struck down iniquity and deprived injustice of its children, as Moses did Egypt. It is he who led us from slavery to freedom, from darkness to light, from death to life, from tyranny to eternal kingship. He is the Pasch of our salvation. It is he who endured many sufferings in many people. It is he who was slain in Abel. In Isaac he was fettered. In Jacob he was a hireling. In Joseph he was sold. In Moses he was exposed to die. In David he was persecuted. In the prophets he was scorned. And so on and so forth. It is a most stunning homily, and it gives us a sense of how we celebrated the Easter Vigil in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. And the Easter Vigil centers on the Passover Lamb, Jesus himself. So, now I want to do a tiny bit of exegesis, and just a very small bit. And I want to just start, of course, with chapter 11, and just say this. There's a little bit in it about the silver and the gold and getting those from the Egyptians and all of that sort of stuff. So what's really that about? Well, perhaps it means that the Egyptians, through all these plagues, are starting to admire the Hebrews. They have something and they want to share a little bit of their gifts with them. Or it may be, and this is what some people say, aren't the Hebrews pretty clever because they can trick the Egyptians to get all their money? I want to go straight now onto the priestly Exodus 12, 1 to 20, the Passover and unleavened bread. You'll notice that there is, instead of speaking to the sons of Israel, they speak to the community now. And the correct word is probably congregation. So all this is being spoken to a liturgical community, a community in worship. And if you'll notice that the directions about how to celebrate Passover are: take a sheep or a goat from the flock on the 10th day, an animal without blemish, 1 year old, and slaughter it. There's a ritual slaughter where the whole community is involved on the 14th day, and then put some blood on the doorpost, etc., etc. So it's really a massive community here, and it's a ritual way of slaughtering it, and perhaps that's all, of course, from certainly it's well after the Exodus itself. It's putting it as though this is what Moses told the people to do. But when we read it, we can see this is how the Passover was celebrated long after Moses. This day is a day of remembrance for you. A day of remembrance. Remember the Exodus whenever you celebrate the Passover. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, again, strong stuff. Unless you keep this feast, you're going to be excommunicated out of the community. So Exodus is to be celebrated with these two feasts of Passover and unleavened bread. They are to be remembered with great honour, and if you don't celebrate them, you are to be excommunicated. So it's the fundamental feast whereby we remember what God did for us at the Exodus. The third little thing is from Exodus 12, 21 to 39. Back to the narrative now. Again, the stress. You must keep these rituals all the time. Even when you enter the land, the promised land which I will give you, you must keep this ritual. So the strong sense is on connecting this event with what we celebrate. And it says the people bowed and worshipped. So we're certainly within a ritual. You know, when the actual destruction takes place of the firstborn, perhaps we're entitled to think of God as being a bit cruel in some way, as Richard Dawkins might say. But I think we've got to think in terms of, we mustn't forget that Israel is God's firstborn child. And God's firstborn child has been treated so badly by the Egyptians. And also the firstborn children, male, of the Israelites were to be destroyed too, if we remember. So really, it's God taking the part of the Jewish people against those who oppress them. In that sense, God is always on the side of the underdog, of the oppressed. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. So Israel leaves Egypt with all the gold and silver. Is it just a hint that now they leave, no longer as slaves, but dressed up in finery as free people? Or again, is it that trick that was sort of set? So we're not sure of why that business is. Sometimes it looks as though it's a trick. Sometimes it looks as though It's meant to be to dignify the